As I mentioned, you guys have already done a written learning styles assessment, but the one we're going to do this morning is an interactive assessment. Well, I think it's important to know how our students learn because it allows us to be able to tailor the learning experience to benefit them the most. Most of us will teach in a way that is comfortable based on our own personal learning styles. And so if our students perhaps have a different primary learning style, then that means you may need to make some adjustments to make sure that they're able to get the most out of your lessons or out of your lecture. So it's important for us to be aware of that, at least so that we know how to be able to make it a better experience, a better learning experience for them. It's interesting to see a lot of times when students do learning styles assessments, it's almost like you feel like it's a test or a quiz or something. And so sometimes you feel like maybe there's like a right or wrong answer, or that if you like say something a certain way that maybe people will think differently of you. And so sometimes those written assessments are not as accurate as something that's a little bit more interactive. Also, doing the interactive assessment allows you to get a better understanding of what we mean when we're talking about your primary learning styles and how that impacts your learning in the classroom and outside of the classroom.
Well, the purpose of the lesson in the SLS class is to really get students to understand that their learning styles really affect how they will learn in college, how they can use that information to help them become better students, how they study, what tips and strategies do they need to use. So this lesson is one of those that we typically have in our SLS courses. I like to teach it because a lot of students don't understand that the way that you learn and the way that you receive information and understand information may be different from someone else's. So someone may be in class writing notes in a bunch of different colors and you're wondering, why are they doing that? And you may want to try that strategy, but that may not work best for you because you may learn best by listening, or you may learn best by actively doing something. And knowing that definitely helps students to take the information and put it in a format or in a way that's going to best help them understand the information. So that's what the lesson is for, to teach them not only that it affects you in school, but it's pretty much who you are as a person. It's something that you do on a regular basis anyways. So they just begin to learn, like when we were in class today teaching the lesson, and some of the students like, oh, yeah, I do that. That's how I, when I ask for instructions or directions on where I'm going, I think about the building and the physical locations as opposed to the verbal information that I'm receiving. So it helps them to see that it's just more than not just in school, but it's in every part of their life.
So this is how this is going to work. We are going to run through 3 cycles of this, okay? In the first cycle, I'm going to show you 15 images. You're not going to write anything, you're not going to say anything, you're not going to do anything, you're just going to watch, you're going to look. When I say go, you will pick up your writing utensil and you will have a minute to write down as many of those things as you can remember, okay? Again, don't cheat. It's not a quiz. It doesn't matter how many you remember, how many you don't. No one's going to think differently of you. Just honestly write down as much as you can remember, and then we'll go back over them. And then we'll do the same thing again with another 15 items, but this time I will say them out loud. And then again, you will have a minute to write down as many as you can remember. And in the last cycle of this, I will pass around 15 items that you can look at, you can touch, you can feel, and then we'll do the same thing. I'll give you a minute to write down as many as you can remember. And then we'll tally up and see which categories you have the highest scores in, okay? So put your writing utensils down. You don't need them. You're just going to be watching, okay? And here we go. I prefer to do the interactive version of the learning styles assessment because what you'll find a lot of times when students do the written assessments, they kind of feel like there's a right or wrong answer, or that perhaps picking a certain choice will have some kind of reflection on them. Like maybe it's going to make them look like a bad student or something if they have to admit that they doodle in class. Well, that really is just a sign of them being a particular style of learner, but sometimes students are worried about that or what the perception will be. And so they may kind of fib or fudge their answers on the assessment, which is not helpful because it's for them to better understand themselves. So with the interactive version of the assessment, it takes away, some of those concerns that students have because they're busy doing it and experiencing it, and they're not really thinking about perhaps the perception or reflection upon themselves of their responses. And also, doing the interactive version lets them experience what it means to have a particular learning style rather than, just answering questions. They physically see the difference in their ability to perform the task based on whether they, were taking in that information visually or, by listening or by participating. So they physically see the differences in themselves in terms of how they're able to perform based on how they receive the information. And so you really can't beat that in terms of really helping them to appreciate just how important their learning style is to their function and their performance in class and, as Marsha mentioned, in life.
Right.
Okay, you can stop. That's always my favorite one because about 30 seconds in, it's like, I don't know what she said. All right, so let's go back over the list. I like this one too because usually this is the one where people make up stuff.
I think the strengths in the lessons are always when those students have those aha moments of, oh yeah, yeah, that's pretty much how I do stuff. That's why I bring in the IKEA example. The IKEA example where we talk about how your learning styles play into how you would put together an item. You purchase an item, you take it home, you take it out of the box. Depending on your learning style, depending on the way that you receive information will depend on what you do next. If you're kinesthetic, you're just going to go for it and put it together. If you're a visual person, you're going to think back to what it looked like and try to envision what it looked like at the end. If you're an auditory person, you're going to want someone to read the information. If you're a read-write, you want everyone to lay out all of the pieces to the part. So really having them take it outside of the classroom and see that in life we do these things on a regular basis definitely helps them to make that connection between that.
I have to agree with Marsha. When you can have students have that aha moment where they can figure out, what was the purpose of the activity or the intervention before you even have a chance to explain it. And so right after we finished the interactive assessment, 2 students up front said, oh man, like I totally get why you made us do this. And, just to make sure that they were on the right track, I asked them, okay, well, why? And they hit the nail right on the head. It was all about them being able to understand, what they are and how they learn and being able to interact in that assessment. It just made it clear for them how important that was. And so that to me was a win because that was exactly the point of the activity. Well, we talked about it a lot, and there were certainly some obvious connections. What was really interesting was was that the spring? Mm-hmm. When we were teaching, we shared a lot of the same students. So they were in my class anyway, and they were in her class, so they would kind of jump back and forth, and they'd be like, Miss, we did this in Professor Butler's class, or, vice versa. So it seemed like a real natural, collaboration because there are a lot of things, since this is an introductory math class, it's one of the first math courses that students will take, we try to include and infuse some of those success skills and awareness about their learning in this course so that they can try to apply that to math, but then having the connection to the class where they're learning about those things, and even more than I could have covered on my own, it just really seemed to make sense.
Yeah, and a lot of the students between the 2 classes would come back and say, well, I know we did a learning styles in your class, and we also did it in our math class, and they saw the connection in it. But definitely combining the 2 subjects was, something that we thought would be very beneficial to our students because we worked with a lot of them that were in both of our classes in the spring. So it just made more sense just to connect the classes and go from there.
I would have to say that for me, it's really important for me to have a sense of who's in the room, and I'm sure Marcia would agree with that. I am more visual and kind of kinesthetic, read write. I learned something about myself. I'm read write, and so I tend to tailor my class experience in that manner. But I also talk really fast. So for my students that are auditory, sometimes that can be a problem. So it helps me to know who I'm dealing with so that I can make adjustments. And so knowing who's in the room, who I might need to repeat things for or slow down or maybe make adjustments in terms of their activity. So that to me was important to be able to learn that from this activity.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. It's just helping us to better understand who our students are and how to tailor the lessons and the activities towards those students.
For me, it was confirmation. The majority of our students were kinesthetic, which is really seems to be the trend these days. If you very rarely find students that are auditory, and then you'll have some combo like visual or visual and kinesthetic. So I do a lot of activities, like active learning activities in my course anyway. So on one hand, it's good because it lets me know, the more of that, the better. But again, it also means that I have to make some adjustments. We did have 2 that were auditory, and so sometimes that means I may need to encourage them to maybe record the lesson or, to do some things to make sure that they're able to get just as much benefit out of the course as the other students are. Because sometimes you forget about them because they are the minority, and you want to make sure. So I have to think about how to do that. Even today, when Marcia was giving her homework assignment, I could see the students listening. It was written down, but I could also see them kind of going like, as she was talking, so I started making a list on the board for them, So even though she said it and they could have been listing it themselves, you sort of have to model that behavior for them, how they personally need to make adjustments when the situation or the learning experience is maybe not tailored to their own learning style. How do you make adjustments? And so modeling that behavior is another element that we have to try to incorporate.
And also teaching the students that sometimes you're going to have a very auditory type teacher, that you have to take the information and put it into a way that's going to help you the best. So maybe taking notes or recording a lesson with teacher permission may be a way that can help you. So it's okay that we all learn differently, and that it's okay, and it's just a part of life that we all do things a little bit differently. But just to really reemphasize the fact that in college you're going to do a lot of reading, a lot of writing, a lot of coursework. So really taking that information and saying, how am I going to use what I've learned and put it in a format or a way that will help me better understand the information.
Yeah, I think that's the other element too, which we both kind of mentioned, but just driving home that point for them that they will have to make adjustments. Instructors teach in different ways, and just because you may not have an instructor that teaches to your modality of learning, you have to make adjustments as a student, because you have to make sure that you are able to process, to receive, to retain that information. And so again, kind of giving them some tools and techniques as we work through this semester that they can put to use for themselves.